5:55 a.m. The stadium was empty. Not half empty, not quiet, completely empty. And yet, one of the most important women's tennis tournaments of the summer was unfolding on that court in real time. How does that happen? How do you sell out a match so completely that fans are sleeping in their cars outside just to get close to the stadium, only for the next major match to suddenly feature rows of empty seats? The answer is a 21-year-old girl from the Philippines who was never expected to become the center of attention. What Alex Eala did at the National Bank Open in Toronto in 2026 didn't just shake the tennis world. It exposed something the sport had been quietly overlooking for years. But we need to go back, because the real story doesn't begin with the empty seats. It begins days earlier, when the tennis world was still underestimating her. Toronto, Canada, 2026. The National Bank Open was underway, and the massive stadium was preparing for another high-profile week of women's tennis. The draw had been released, the favorites had been identified, and the biggest names on tour were expected to dominate the headlines. But buried among those names was a 21-year-old Filipino star who had already started attracting attention across the tennis world. Her name was Alex Eala. She wasn't simply another player filling a place in the draw anymore. She was becoming a global attraction. Fans were following her matches, Filipino supporters were filling the stands, and every appearance was generating a level of energy that tournament organizers could no longer ignore. What happened next would turn the National Bank Open into something far bigger than a normal tennis tournament. As Alex stepped onto the court in Toronto, the atmosphere began changing. Filipino flags appeared throughout the crowd, supporters traveled long distances just to see her play, and the noise surrounding her matches became impossible to miss. This was no longer just about rankings or match results. It was about an entire nation discovering a new sporting obsession. Alex had arrived in Toronto as one of the most intriguing young players in women's tennis, but she was quickly becoming the player everyone wanted to watch. Every round brought more attention, more fans, and more pressure. The tournament had expected tennis. What it got was a phenomenon. And the deeper Alex went, the more obvious it became that something extraordinary was happening. The National Bank Open wasn't simply giving Alex Eala another opportunity to compete against the world's best. It was becoming the stage where the global tennis audience finally realized just how powerful her rise could become. What started as one young Filipino player entering a prestigious tournament was turning into a story about history, fandom, and the rapidly changing commercial map of women's tennis. And by the time the crowds began gathering outside the stadium, the question was no longer whether Alex Eala belonged among the biggest names in the sport. The question was how far this 21-year-old from the Philippines could actually go. Except something happened that nobody planned for. Music, she didn't lose in the early rounds. She didn't go quietly. She didn't do what an unexpected young player was supposed to do. And the moment Alex Eala stopped following the script, something else started happening entirely. Music, something that had less to do with expectations and everything to do with who she was, where she came from, and the growing army of fans behind her. Round 1 at the National Bank Open in Toronto, Alex stepped onto the hard court facing a dangerous opponent with years of experience on the biggest stages of professional tennis. The pressure was immediate, the rallies were intense, and every point carried the weight of a tournament where one mistake could send her home. But Alex refused to panic. When the match reached its most important moments, she stayed composed, trusted her aggressive baseline game, and found a way through. Music, she held her nerve, closed out the match, and walked away with a win that looked more important than the scoreboard suggested. It was clean, confident, and efficient, the kind of performance that makes experienced tennis journalists pause, look again, and quietly write a name in their notebooks. One victory doesn't create a phenomenon, but it plants a seed. And in Toronto, that seed was about to grow much faster than anyone expected. Because the deeper Alex went, the bigger the challenge became, and the next opponent waiting across the net was exactly the kind of player who could expose whether this young Filipino star was truly ready for the biggest stage. Music. This was no longer about simply surviving another round. This was about proving that Alex Eala belonged among the elite. And as the crowd began to realize what they were watching, something remarkable started happening in the stands. Filipino flags began appearing everywhere, supporters were getting louder with every point, and Alex was no longer playing like an outsider hoping for a good run. She was playing like a player who expected to be there. The National Bank Open had started as another stop on the tennis calendar, but with every victory, Alex Eala was turning Toronto into the center of a much bigger story. She had made the game look almost unfair at times, and Alex walked onto the court in Toronto with the posture of someone who still hadn't received the memo telling her how this was supposed to go. The pressure was enormous, the opponent was dangerous, and the National Bank Open crowd was waiting to see whether this young Filipino star could actually handle the moment. But when the match reached its decisive stages, Alex didn't panic. She didn't back away. She stepped forward. Music, and when the final point was struck, Alex had done it. She had won. She didn't simply survive. She didn't scrape through on luck. She had beaten a major opponent on one of the biggest stages of the North American hardcourt swing, and that was the moment everything changed. Music, not just for Alex, not just for Toronto, but for tennis fans across the Filipino diaspora. Within hours, the posts were everywhere. Within hours, people who had never seriously considered traveling to Toronto were checking flight prices, searching for tickets, and making plans to get to the National Bank Open. Group chats that had been quiet for months suddenly exploded with all-caps messages, Philippine flag emojis, screenshots, and disbelief. She just won in Toronto. This is not a drill. Those kinds of messages captured something that formal tennis journalism could never fully explain. This wasn't simply excitement. This was an awakening. Music. The Filipino diaspora has a relationship with its sporting heroes that is genuinely unlike almost anything else in the world. When one of their own reaches the biggest stages, they don't just watch. They mobilize. They travel. They spend. They show up. And when enough people do it at once, they can completely change the atmosphere, and even the economics, of an entire sporting event. Music, Toronto was about to find that out firsthand. What tournament organizers had expected to be another major week on the tennis calendar was rapidly becoming something much bigger, because Alex Eala wasn't just bringing her tennis to the National Bank Open. She was bringing an entire community with her. The quarterfinal came, and if the previous round had been a statement, this was the confirmation. Alex faced another elite opponent, a player ranked among the world's best and experienced enough to know exactly what to do when a young challenger starts playing above expectations. But Alex didn't look intimidated. She looked ready. She controlled the rallies, absorbed the pressure, and played with a calmness that seemed completely out of place for a 21-year-old competing deep into one of the biggest tournaments of the North American summer swing. Music. When the final ball landed, Alex had done it again. Straight sets. Composed. Almost serene. She walked toward the net with the same expression she had carried throughout the tournament, as if she genuinely believed she belonged on that court. And that belief was now spreading outward in waves across the Filipino diaspora, from Toronto to Vancouver, from New York to Los Angeles, from London to Sydney, Madrid to Manila. But here's what nobody had prepared for: the demand for tickets to Alex's next match. Tournament staff began looking at the numbers and wondering whether something had gone wrong in the system. Tickets for major National Bank Open matches can be difficult to secure, but this was different. Sections were disappearing rapidly, demand was surging, and Filipino fans were organizing themselves to make sure they could be inside the stadium when Alex played again. Music. Families traveled across Canada. Students rearranged their schedules. Workers requested time off. Filipino communities that had never attended a major tennis event together were suddenly planning entire trips around one player. And the reason was simple: they weren't just watching Alex Eala compete. They were watching one of their own make history. Music. The tournament organizers quickly realized they had a problem they hadn't anticipated. More people wanted to see Alex than the original seating plans could comfortably accommodate. Additional sections had to be opened, crowd management had to be adjusted, and security teams prepared for larger-than-expected crowds around the stadium. The atmosphere around the National Bank Open was changing by the hour. Music, and then came the match. The opponent was dangerous, experienced, and determined to stop Alex's incredible run. For Filipino fans, there was a quiet tension underneath all the excitement. They had watched Alex defeat one opponent after another, but now she was facing another major test against a player capable of changing a match with a few explosive games. Music. The crowd settled in. Philippine flags filled the stands. The noise grew louder as Alex walked onto the court. And then the match began. Almost immediately, something felt different. Music. Alex wasn't playing like a young player hoping to keep her dream alive. She was playing like someone who expected to win. And within the opening games, the entire stadium began to understand that Toronto was no longer simply hosting another round of the National Bank Open. It was witnessing the rise of a player whose impact was becoming much bigger than tennis itself. Not wrong in the way sports can go wrong when one player is simply outplayed. Wrong in a different way. Alex was moving differently. There was something about the way she was reaching for certain balls, the way she reacted to heavy returns, the tiny moments of hesitation that most fans might never notice but that experienced tennis eyes immediately recognize. Her opponent kept applying pressure, producing powerful serves and relentless ground strokes, forcing Alex into longer rallies and uncomfortable positions. The score began to develop in a way that felt almost cruel given the context, given the crowd, given everything Alex had already accomplished at the National Bank Open. Music, eventually, the match slipped away. The dream was over. Alex walked off the court with her head up. That detail matters more than it sounds, because anyone who has ever worked for something enormous and watched it disappear at the final step knows how difficult it is to keep your chin level when everything inside you wants to fold. She kept it level. She walked. Music, she didn't look back. And then, inside the stands, something happened that not a single sports psychologist or crowd management expert could have scripted. Music. The Filipino fans didn't boo. They didn't turn against her. They didn't make the kind of noise you might expect from a crowd that had traveled long distances, spent money, rearranged schedules, and dreamed of watching their player reach the biggest stages of the tournament. They stood up. They applauded slowly at first, then louder, then continuously. Music, a wall of sound filled the stadium. It wasn't celebration, and it wasn't exactly grief. It was something in between, something difficult to put into words, but impossible to misunderstand if you were standing there. Alex had lost the match, but she had won something much bigger in the hearts of the people watching her. One by one, fans eventually began leaving the stadium, quietly and deliberately, carrying Philippine flags and wearing expressions that said everything without needing a single word. They had come to Toronto hoping to witness history, and even in defeat, they knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. Music. Then came the next major match on the schedule. Two elite players were set to battle for a place in the final, a genuine contest between established stars who had earned their position through years of professional tennis. On paper, it should have been another major attraction at the National Bank Open. On paper, the stadium should have been packed. But this wasn't about paper. The stands that had been overflowing with Filipino supporters just a day earlier suddenly looked completely different. Sections were noticeably quieter. Some seats were empty. Entire rows that had been filled with flags, chants, and cheers were now dotted with isolated spectators. Music. The organizers had done everything they could to maintain the energy: promotions, local outreach, ticket offers, and efforts to bring more fans into the stadium. But something had changed. Because the seats were never really about tennis alone. They were about her. They were about Alex Eala. And she wasn't playing. The next match unfolded in a strangely subdued atmosphere. The tennis itself was competitive, the players fought for every point, and the match deserved a packed stadium. But the energy simply wasn't the same. Music. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Only 24 hours earlier, Toronto had felt like a Filipino celebration, with thousands of supporters turning a tennis tournament into something resembling a homecoming. Now the same stadium felt noticeably quieter. And that was when tournament organizers, journalists, players, and fans were forced to confront a remarkable truth. Alex Eala had become more than another competitor in the draw. She had become the reason people were buying tickets, traveling across cities, filling seats, waving flags, and creating an atmosphere that the tournament itself could not manufacture. The National Bank Open had discovered something that tennis rarely sees: a player whose presence could change the entire emotional temperature of an event. And the most surprising part was that Alex had done it without even winning the tournament. The applause was polite. A National Bank Open final, one of the most prestigious events on the women's tennis calendar, should have felt electric, But there was something strangely hollow about the atmosphere simply because the player who had made the entire week feel different was now watching from the stands instead of competing on the court. Music, and that image, Alex Ela sitting among the crowd, watching a final that could have been hers, carrying a week that was simultaneously one of the biggest achievements of her career and a painful reminder of how close she had come, is an image the tennis world would not forget quickly. A tournament official spoke afterward, not in the triumphant tone of someone celebrating a successful event, but in the careful, slightly stunned tone of someone realizing that the assumptions they had made before the tournament were no longer valid. "We underestimated the impact of Alex's presence," the official essentially acknowledged. The Filipino community didn't simply come to watch tennis. Music, they came to watch her. And when she was eliminated, many of them had no reason to stay. There is a sentence that should be written somewhere inside the WTA headquarters. They came to watch her, not simply the sport, her. And when she was gone, the sport alone wasn't enough to keep the same crowd inside the stadium. That is not an insult to tennis. It is a statement about what Alex Ela has become and what an entire diaspora has decided she represents. Look at what Alex actually accomplished during her National Bank Open run. She defeated highly ranked opposition. She competed deep into one of the biggest hardcourt tournaments of the season. She proved that her game could hold up against established stars under enormous pressure. She gained valuable ranking